Hello, Hayward. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Hayward. So I got your email and I already replied to it in terms of like breaking things down a little bit to clarify the two different topics. Basically, there are two things behind your question. The first one is how to make a modular character out of modular parts. And the other one is how to actually assign a custom skeletal mesh to an existing controller to replace the default mannequin. So these are two different topics. And the first one is actually the easiest because the modular aspect is just skinning, right? It's adding a new component on top of something that works already. So this is easy, and this is actually the second part. The important part was your other question, which is how to actually make a skeletal mesh work on a given controller. And this is the important part and the complex part, right? So you mentioned a flight controller. So I suppose it might be this one or an equivalent from the marketplace. This one is very good. So we'll use this as an example. So this is just the default project installed, right? So at the moment I only have this dynamic flight. So I'm going to add the content to it like this. Dynamic flight. There you go. Should show up right there. All right, so I suppose this is basically what you have. My content here, the female workout bundle, and then the dynamic flight. So the first thing to understand is how the skeletal meshes are actually working in Unreal. So the first thing we'll do is to go to the flight controller, which is probably here, and identify which mesh and which skeleton it is actually using. So in the viewport, if I check the mesh here, the mannequin, I can find out which skeletal mesh it's actually using. So let's put it in a scene like this. So now we have this point of reference. So in Unreal, again, well, you can see it here because the author grouped them together. A skeletal mesh relies on three components, or I guess you could say four if you count the animations or the animation blueprint. But basically you have the mesh itself, the skeleton that it is linked to. So you can display it. I think you can show it here. Show bones. I think there's a way, but basically this is a skeleton, right? And then the physics assets that are used if you're using any ragdoll, this kind of behavior. Now the thing to understand is that even though Unreal shows the skeleton and the mesh as two different components, two different objects, they're actually not that separated, in the sense that the skeletal mesh actually has the skeleton joint information inside itself, right? So it's just the fact that Unreal actually shows the skeleton as a different asset, which seems separate, but it's actually a duplicate of the internal information. But the fact that it is separate in the Unreal sense means that we can actually instruct any mesh that has a compatible internal skeleton to be driven by that quote-unquote master skeleton, right? And to do so, it's done by right-clicking the skeletal asset, going to skeleton, and then doing assign skeleton, right? And here you can tell that the system actually detected all the compatible skeletons that are inside the project, right? So let's try that. This is the first thing you need to know how to do. It's how to instruct a skeletal mesh to use a given skeleton. So we know right now that the one that is being used by the controller, the flight controller, is the one called UE4 mannequin skeleton. This is actually the default name. This is the same than the way it is named when you open the third-person project, right? The default one. I actually don't like the fact that the creator of the flight controller didn't rename it, because that means you can end up with duplicates with the same name, which is not a good thing. So add an extension called flight, right? That way we know exactly that this skeleton is the one that is being used for the flight controller. And you could do the same, for instance, for the skeletal mesh too, or even with the physics asset. But the one that's really important is the skeleton. Right, so we have that mesh, which is here. And then we also have my models, which are here in the female workout content. And if you go to the body form, you can actually see that not only do I have the female structure short and tall, I also include, just for practicality's sake, the male form, right? And I know that your goal is to use the female, but I think, you know, one step at a time, we are going to start with the male. So if I click on this male here, you can also see that it's being driven by a skeleton. And here you can tell that the skeleton is here, skeletal male body workout. So you can see that I'm putting that extension at the end of all my files so that you can tell instantly like where that skeleton belongs to, right? So the goal is to actually instruct that mesh to not use that skeleton, but use the other one from the flight controller. So I think you can see where I'm going with this. So let's go to the mesh. I don't want to, quote-unquote, damage that model, so I'm just going to make it a duplicate. There you go. Let's call it standalone 2. And for this one new mesh, I'm going to instruct the model to use another skeleton than the one it shipped with, right? So assign skeleton. And here you can see that in the list, I have the flight skeleton already available, the one that I renamed _flight. And you can tell that, you know, everything is compatible, right? Because not only is it compatible, it's actually exactly the same. This is the one from Epic, right? So it's telling me that it needs to be saved, both at the asset level and also at the skeletal level. And I suppose it will show up as unsaved if I go there. Let's see. Oh, it looks like it's saved already, right? Yeah, flat. So once we do that, I mean, once this is done, I now have one version of my body form that is linked to the original workout skeleton, right? And I have another version next to it, this one, which is linked to the flight skeleton. What that means, what that means is that nothing changed for the mannequin, but for this guy, you'll see it from there. Like, this mannequin is linked to the flight skeleton, so you have all the flight related animation that should show up here. See, dodge left, fast flight, all the animations are there. And on this one as well. The fast flight, dodge, everything is there too. See? You can tell that this model can be driven by the animations, which means that at the controller level, so the blueprint, the flight blueprint, we can now instruct the blueprint to use that one model, right? So let's try that. Dynamic flight, blueprints, character. So this is the flight controller, right? And now in the mesh drop down, I guess, you now have access to all the meshes that have been linked to the skeleton that this controller is using. And now you can tell, I think it's going to show all the mesh that use a similar skeleton, but obviously we want the one that we actually linked, which is standalone 2. And now you can see that it's directly linked to it. So if I compile this blueprint, it would be the current for the flight node. So now it's directly linked. So this is already a very good step. Now, what we just did is to actually edit the blueprint itself. I wouldn't quite recommend doing that. You can do it a bit more cleanly by. So let's revert what we did. Right, we're gonna use the mannequin again. So I suppose it's this guy. Let's compile. All right, so we reverted what we did, right? So let's cancel this. And what you can actually do is, instead of using the player start, you can actually drop the controller in there. I mean, I'm not sure. It depends on the way the game has been set up, but you should also be able to, yeah, so just use that instance of the blueprint and just set it to inherit player 0. So this is basically the same. And now, instead of editing the blueprint, we can just tweak the instance of the blueprint. So that way we don't modify the source, we just modify the child. So in there, now we can use this guy here, while keeping the blueprint as it was, as provided with the content. See, this is still the mannequin. So that's one thing we can do. So, okay, so everything works for the custom mesh for the male. Now the next question you have, obviously, is how to do so for the female. So if the blueprint is using, I would say, normal behavior, like nothing exotic, it should work just fine even with the female. So let's try that. Female workout, meshes, body forms, tall female, because that's the one you told me you want to use. So same thing, duplicate, standalone 2, and now skeleton, assign skeleton, we assign the flight controller skeleton. So now that it's done, it should show up in the list as well, under female. Tall female, standalone 2. And now she's she's driven by the flight skeleton. Alright, so now we have a female that looks like a female, like she's not been disproportionate in any way, and she's compatible with the controller. Now, of course, the animations were made for a male superhero, so even though the proportions are still female, you can tell that she has a bit of a manly attitude, you know. But that's nothing you can really do about this. Right? This is the way the animations were made. If everything goes well, you should also be able to even use the short female, because she's much shorter, she's a bit more realistic, she doesn't have the long arms. You should be able to do that too. So let's try it. Duplicate, petite female standalone 2, assign skeleton to flight, and she should be in there as well. Petite female standalone, so you can tell she's shorter and a bit more realistic. You know, she doesn't have the long arms from the tall female, and she works just fine as well. And she's not being like deformed in any way. She still has normal proportions. So this is the first step, right? Like actually making sure that the controller behaves the way you want it with the mannequin or the body form that you want to use. Then the modular aspect is another topic altogether, right? And it's actually pretty simple, because once you've done that, now you know that the asset can behave well, right? So all you will need to do is to go to the actual assets you want to use. Let's say, for instance, let's use the short one as an example. Let's use the short jacket, right? So same thing, I'm going to make a duplicate. Assign skeleton to the flight, right? So this model is ready. Let's do the same for the head, for instance. So petite female, again, another duplicate. Petite female head 2, assign skeleton to flight. Right. And now inside the blueprint, you can change the structure of the blueprint so that it uses multiple skeletal assets. I'm going to make another video for that just after, because it's a different topic. But let's just override the jacket for now. So, female, where is she? Workout hair, no. Windbreaker up 2, that's the jacket. Right. So here I changed it at the blueprint level, which means that if I revert, now I have the jacket. There you go. So the jacket is working, and she can fly around. It looks like something out of that movie, I don't remember the name, with the 3 kids with alien powers. That looks like Akira. I don't remember the name of it, but anyway. So once you've done that, and again, I'm going to make a dedicated video for that, but basically you can add a new component to the blueprint, skeletal mesh. And then you can basically expand on the number of items. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to do it right away. So let's. We're going to use mesh as the main one. So for this, I'm just going to point to the head. I like to use the head as the master, right? And now for this one, we're just going to call it, I don't know, upper, right? Now we can hunt for the hood. So that would be that one. So now we have the head and the hood, right? You want to use the same animation blueprint. So let's see what it's using. It seems like it's just using the default. Oh, there you go. Third person animation blueprint. I'm going to rename it flight for clarity. All right. And you want the same one used here. So let's pick flight. There you go. So the 2 are using the same animation blueprint, but this is not enough. Even though it seems like everything is okay, you can have some synchronization problems if you only do that. So you actually need to also have some synchronization of the meshes. And this is done on game start. So let's look for, where is this? Input axis, no, so let's do I don't remember the name of the node. 1 second. Female workout, blueprint. Oh, on begin play. Sorry, I forgot the name. Yeah, begin play. Oh, actually, it's probably here. No, that's a tick. We want begin. There you go. So on at the beginning of the play session, you need to instruct the different parts to be synchronized, and this is done using a set master pose component node like this. The target needs to be the model that is used as a child, so that would be the upper in that case, target. And the master bone component is the main mesh, so that's the head, right? There you go. And once you do that, everything should be perfectly linked in terms of animations. So now the 2 are behaving together, and they'll never get out of sync, like, you know, when colliding with another object or stuff like that. So that's basically it. So you could basically build the whole character that way, right? So let's do lower. Let's do shoes and gloves. So now we also need to again make the duplicates again. So let's take this guy, duplicate, lower 2, assign skeleton to flight. Let's do the shoes as well. Duplicate, number 2, assign skeleton to, oops, sorry, I went too fast. Female workout, skeleton, assign skeleton to flight, and then the gloves. Duplicate, number 2, assign skeleton to flight. So all these should be linkable now. So they should be available in the list. petit workout lower 2. That's the legs. Now we'll do the shoes, and gloves. Workout, where are they? Windbreaker, shoes, lower, gloves. There you go. So they should all link as expected. There you go. And you also need to add them all as the target for the synchronization. So lower, shoes, gloves. So you should look pretty good at this point, right? You have the whole character. She can fly around. She can do everything without any glitches. So this is all perfect at this point. The last thing you might want to add, I mean, it really depends if your camera is going to show it or not. It's the hair, right? Because if you look at it closely, let's see, dynamic flight, blueprint, character. If you look at it closely, she doesn't have hair because the head is just, you know, a head without hair, right? You'll see it here. So you might want to add some hair model. So the hair is also a skeletal mesh, but it doesn't use the full skeleton because it's just an attachment. It's just a single bone that is then linked to the head bone of the master skeleton. So to make it very clear, let's use another upper. I'm going to use the one without the hood. Flight again. So let's use windbreaker down. It should be, there you go. Windbreaker down. So now you can see that she's bald. So we want to add some hair on her. So to do that, it's another skeletal mesh. I'm gonna call that hair. I think it needs to be a child of the main one, so let's do that. And now we're going to hunt down for this hair model, which is just a scalp and then a few hair that dangles in front of her. So that's the one you would use if you want to have the hood on top. And we just attach it to the head. And reset the transforms and add, I think, -90 to Y. So this one is the one you would want to use if you're using the hood up like this. By the way, at least she has a little bit of hair dangling in front, right? But you could also use, let's say, this one, right? If you want to use, for instance, the hood down. Right. Now, of course, this is a whole other topic, like how to make the, you know, the bones work for the hair. This is a bit complicated, you know. So let's just do what you actually want to do, which is this. Upper, hood down. Hood up, sorry. There you go. So now we should have a full character looking exactly the way you want it, with a little bit of hair, you know, at the front. You can see it here, and flying around. So I think that answers all your questions, I think. So let me know if you still want me to send you like a pre-assembled model. I think I'm going to do one anyway, because I think people appreciate that. But basically, you don't really need it. You can recreate the whole character inside the blueprint that way, and it works just fine. All right, so I'm gonna send that to you, and let me know if you have any other questions. Thank you, and again, thank you for your support and purchase. Bye bye.